So my name is Brian Sorgenfrei. I currently serve as the associate pastor at Christ Presbyterian Church in Oxford, Mississippi. But I was the RUF campus minister at Mississippi State from 2009 until 2017. Man, when I hear RUF Mississippi State, I think about some of the sweetest years of ministry that my family experienced. Liza and I still talk about this, about what the Spirit was doing at a time of life when Liza and I were having kids. I mean, most of our kids were born here, and so our kids grew up with these college students, and just getting to see students converted, getting to see a lot of students kind of the lights turn on about how gracious Jesus is. Yeah, we just look back now and realize there really was a special something going on that God was doing. And it makes me think of a lot of students that some I've stayed connected to, some I've not, but it's that whole, like, we used to always say, and everybody says, is RUF working? Well, ask me in 10 years, and it's been more than 10 years, and I feel like I'm looking, and so many of those students in those 8 years they are still loving Jesus and loving the church. You got elders, deacons in churches, you got married with kids. It's just, yeah, it's just a sweet time of ministry. I went to seminary still unsure whether I was called to be a pastor. I mean, I loved RUF, and people around me told me I should. But then I went, and at least in seminary, the only thing I could imagine doing was working with college students. I'd done a pseudo-RUF in seminary at Millsaps and loved it. It was probably my favorite part of seminary. Something about 18 to 22-year-olds was fun. They were asking questions. They were honest. You got to see the Spirit work in kind of a piercing way. So I remember sitting on Bebo's couch, and he was like, I'm not sure there's going to be anything in my area. And so I went to assessment. I had talked about RUF Texas. That's where my wife's from. But then Bebo, Nathan Turquie had just taken a call to a church in Memphis. And so he started talking about Mississippi State. And as we prayed and thought, I just wanted to stay in the Mississippi world. I love the state. It had greatly impacted me. It was probably more comfortable. I loved Bebo. I loved my former campus minister, Les Newsom. And so RUF Mississippi State and how God had worked in people's lives through it. And so felt like this gigantic responsibility that was kind of be thrown in the lap of the 28-year-old, which looking back was kind of insane. But also just excited about RUF, excited about being in Mississippi, and I had plenty of friends that went to state and plenty of people I knew in Jackson. My first memory, we actually pulled up at our house, and there was probably 20 students there from Nathan Turquie's kind of ministry team core group that helped us unload our furniture. They helped us set up our house. So my first experience was, okay, there are these junior and senior students that have no idea who I am, but because God had been at work in their life through Nathan, they loved Jesus, they loved this ministry, and whoever was coming next, they were going to be here. There was a group of juniors and seniors that really loved my family and did the work of ministry. Jessica, Miriam, and Donald Tadia were two interns that I inherited too, and they were this kind of rock of stability. Dorman was packed, and nobody was making these students show up. Nobody was forcing them to. A ton of stuff they could have been doing on Thursday nights. That's when we had it. And they kept showing up to hear God's word, to think through stuff, to make friends and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I would say I was overwhelmingly nervous about this thing called RUF Mississippi State that was beloved because of the work that Jesus had done. The students who were deeply involved with RUF, I now look back and it was kind of shocking that on Thursday nights there'd be a date party, whatever, cow date party, whatever. A large number of students would show up to RUF and go to the date party afterwards. But there was this centrality of, this is going to be a place of real deep friendship, and this is going to be a place that we're going to serve other people and learn about and love Jesus. So that was pretty unique. Mississippi State students always have they kind of have a vicious love of this place. There was a sense of pride of like, no, we're at Mississippi State and we love this place and we're kind of fiercely going to defend it, which made a sense of like school spirit and enjoying being at the place pretty easy. And then you had a good diversity of students. I mean, from various socioeconomic backgrounds, tons of Mississippi, but tons of Huntsville, a lot of Birmingham people. It was regional, but it was diverse within the region. I mean, it was when you had Dak Prescott bring Mississippi State to #1. You had all kinds of school pride going on. So it was the glory days of Mississippi State, at least football. I mean, Dorman is always precious. I can talk about that more. Of all the like improvements that Mississippi State has made in buildings, it's like the thing you always see is Dorman, which is kind of could use some work, but there's also just a beauty about that, about how many people came into that auditorium that was musky and dirty, but man, it was just awesome. It felt like home. I met tons of students in the bakery, and I would camp out there some mornings. I would meet maybe a student one-on-one, but also if I sat in there, other students would introduce me to other people, and it was just this kind of super highway of students flowing through. The Union kind of became that as well. I can remember sitting in the Union the Monday after Mississippi State won the Egg Bowl. I heard this loud cheering, and I looked over and Dan Mullen was walking in with the Egg Bowl trophy, and all these students gathered around. I was like, oh, okay, so here's where I am. Man, I met so many freshmen that were lonely, that were asking questions, and that was my first meeting with a lot of students, was in the Union, where it was either there or in the Starbucks, and you just felt like you started getting to know people, because everybody. The core memory I have of Dorman is I remember when Annie, my second child, was born in October 25th of 2010. And so I remember it was like a week after we had brought her home, and I brought her to RUF, and they played the Lion King music from the very beginning, and I brought Annie on stage, and I like held her up like Simba. And I remember, didn't tell any students. I remember looking out and seeing students like start acting like they're elephants and like bowing down, kind of showing that God is at work even when you realize He's not. I remember hearing from a local church pastor a few years ago that texted me, and he sent me this former student had joined their church, and he's like, look at this. And he sent me her testimony that she'd written out. And she basically said, I became a Christian sitting in Dorman every night, listening to the Bible being preached, and it's where stuff clicked. I didn't know that happened. I knew who she was and we'd interacted, but I wouldn't say she was this like deeply involved student. And yet, 4 years later, someone was looking back and telling, as she was becoming a member of a church, the place she was converted was sitting in Dorman in like the back left every week. So that's not like a memory. It was one of those sweet moments where you're always like, man, God was at work in all these places that I didn't even realize. They thought there was a live shooter on campus. It ended up not being true, but it actually felt real. Like it was all over Twitter. People were hiding in the library, in the classrooms. People were jumping out of windows. I remember I was here. They were shutting down campus. Even though it didn't actually happen, the threat was so real that it felt real. Like there were real people having PTSD, having counseling. I remember that night we had RUF anyway, but we had it outside. And I actually remember there was a cop that was there at the top of the amphitheater, kneeling down, watching the whole place. But tons of people showed up. I just remember seeing people sing things like It Is Well. And there was something about like, people were scared, people were disoriented, but where they wanted to be was around other people singing and being reminded the truth that Jesus is our shepherd. And I remember it ministering to me. It was this kind of powerful moment amidst a really dark and scary thing. From a few one-on-ones and coming to large group here and there was a student who was converted, and I remember my wife, Liza, went to eat at a restaurant, saw this student, came back and goes, Brian, what happened to so-and-so? And I was like, I said, hey, he's become a Christian. And she was like, it is a visible difference in his countenance. Like, I saw him at this restaurant, he's a different person. And that had come through, honestly, his friends loving him, kind of one-on-one sitting down, working through questions, and just the means of grace working in his life. Yeah, I got a lot of memories in you go on small group, the KD house, where, to me, that's the other cool thing about college ministry, is if you had one student in some place that loved Jesus and wanted other people to see about it, they would just invite you in. And again, because it's Mississippi State, everybody's kind of connected, they just show up. So getting to sit in the KD house and just talk about the gospel with a bunch of KDs from all over the place. I mean, there's just, tons of fun memories about that. I can tell you what I didn't like about it. It was the interns left basically every 2 years. But that's what was awesome about it, was being able to say that you really enjoy the people that you work with. I realize not everybody gets to say that. And we had fun. You had people that obviously love Jesus, but were coming to this place, like you said, not knowing anything, but wanting to learn and to love the campus. And I always knew after about 3 or 4 months they would just love it, because there was something about the students that was infectious. Something about how the students taught the interns how to love the campus. Every intern loved being at RUF Mississippi State. It was fun. You kind of felt guilty about being here, because you're like, yeah, this is awesome. So I definitely more and more believe that the Lord works through very imperfect people. And we say in RUF all the time that God is at work, but the older I get, the more I look back and realize I really didn't know what I was doing. And you realize how faithful He was through that. I think I learned to apologize to students. I learned to say I'm sorry a lot, and realize we follow Jesus and we do our best to obey Him, but we're going to mess up. And what our students need is not Brian Sorgenfrei. What they need is Jesus, and that should free us to repent to our students when we need to. So I got some piercing memories of having to tell interns and students I'm sorry. I would say RUF Mississippi State, it wasn't new, but it reinstilled to me what I still believe, that God works through His Word, and His Word is ultimately about Jesus, the Word become flesh. And when you combine His Word in the context of a community of people that love each other, it's like, man, get out of the way. I believe that coming in, it solidified that. I still believe that the means of grace are where the Spirit really works, and our job is to get around those, and He will get to work. I learned to believe that God was at work. Maybe I'm just too arrogant, but yes, He was at work through me, but He was at work apart from me as well. There were just conversations where people who love me had to say things like, Brian, you're too big in this. Like, you think it all revolves around me, and it doesn't. Like, He is at work through 18-year-olds. He's at work through all kinds of things. He works through us, but He's not dependent on us. And so there was some freedom that really came through that. And I would say the other thing that did, I feel like in a culture that's pretty cynical sometimes about the younger generation, RUF Mississippi State made me very optimistic in the long run about what God is doing in the generation behind us. Like, there is people that really are being converted and love Jesus and love His church. So it kept me pretty optimistic about the kingdom of God. The idea that we are adopted into the family of God and that God is our Father, that became really precious to me at Mississippi State, and probably, again, wed with where we were in life. But when God gave us these kids, and I realized I loved them before they ever did anything for me. And there's nothing they can do that'll ever make me quit loving them. And that is a dim reflection of the reality of, sure, I'm a pastor or minister, but ultimately I'm a child of God. I think what became precious to me is that God doesn't love me because of the things that I do for Him. It really is sheer grace. And I think I tasted the freedom of that in moments at Mississippi State. what it means to live as a child and not as a slave. There were times that I think I was talking about that with students, but it was kind of being experienced by myself for the first time. I will say I was manipulated into it. There was an announcement that was made without my permission that said if 100 students come, Brian will get his ear pierced. So I think I was manipulated, but I also didn't think we'd get, but man of my word. And so there was like 70 students gathered around watching this lady pierce my ear, and she put a diamond stud in it. And I worked 2 days until my kids showed up at summer conference, and I took it off because that was not what I wanted them to pierce. Not there's anything wrong with earrings. So yes, that was the shameless lengths I went to get people to summer conference, because summer conference is one of the best things that happened. So I remember being mystified at how big of a deal Roadrunners were. Students really disappointed that they didn't get it, and I was like, wait, what? Because I was in college, I did everything I could to avoid anything but having free time. But then on the other side, I started loving it, because I kept meeting freshmen, and I was like, well, why did you come to State? And it was amazing how many of them said, well, when I came for a tour or a Roadrunner, I started realizing, oh, this is actually what's happening. It's like there is a real love of this place that is spilling over to people that are visiting. I'd say Mississippi State, because of Roadrunners and the love of this place, recruited out of a love for this place in ways that I think other people who come, it's just like, well, my parents came there or whatever, but people would visit and love this place. I would say I got to a point that I tolerated cowbells. I remember at summer conference, when I was a campus minister, I thought it was pretty awesome that they all brought them to volleyball games. And then about 2 years after, I was like, oh yeah, I can see why this gets pretty annoying. All right, here's one more story about my first few years. So when I arrived, my spring semester at large group, there's a guy named T-Mac Howard who showed up. And T-Mac was an RUF Mississippi State alumni from Ricky Jones and Nathan Turkey. And he told me, he had worked at Desire Street in New Orleans. He told me he was about to start a school in Greenwood, Mississippi, because he loved the Delta. He wanted to see God at work there. And so I remember thinking, okay, cool. This is like what RUF hopes, is producing students that are willing to dive back into communities and believe that God is at work in all kinds of places. And I watched students my first year, like Stephen Felker and David Luter and Tim Barnes. There wasn't even a school, it was just this idea. And they went all summer and helped do this tutoring. I literally 2 weeks ago was at somebody's house in Oxford because they were having a celebration where now there's this fully functioning all boys Christian school in the middle of the Delta that is producing graduates of mostly underprivileged students that are hearing the gospel. Some are going to college, some are going into trade school. And I was just struck by man, what 20 years ago that honestly I thought was an idea that would never get off the ground, T-Mac especially, but these RUF Mississippi students kind of dove into this idea, and what was just this small thing has now become this, it's one of the best things going on in Greenwood, Mississippi. To all former students, alumni, interns, February 20th through 22nd, 2026, the 50th anniversary of RUF Mississippi State. I would love to see you there because it is going to be a sweet time. There are many things that God is about, but one of those is celebrating His goodness. If you were a part of RUF Mississippi State from 2009 to 2017, come on back and celebrate. It'll be awesome.